Hello and welcome to the 19th episode of the European Conservatives podcast, Brussels and Beyond, a podcast designed to keep you in the loop about the political wheelings and dealings that are happening here in Brussels and in the capitals of Europe. My name is Zoltán Kottas. Despite winning most of the votes, Marine Le Pen's right-wing anti-immigration party, the National Rally, finished third in the national elections in France. This is mainly due to the voting system. In the second round of voting last Sunday, French President Emmanuel Macron's centrist alliance and the left-wing New Popular Front decided to cooperate and field only one candidate in each constituency to stop the National Rally from winning more seats. This has resulted in a hung parliament, with neither of the three major blocs having enough seats to secure a majority on their own. In the 577-seat National Assembly, the leftist New Popular Front has 180 seats, Macron's alliance has 159, while the National Rally is on 142 seats. The next few weeks are going to be marked by a great deal of uncertainty and intense negotiations over who will be France's next Prime Minister. Emmanuel Macron will probably look for a consensual figure likely to win the support of the left and centre. In a statement, the president said he wants so-called Republican forces to form an absolute majority by banding together, meaning he is in favour of continuing the centrist policy he has pursued until now, based on a relative majority with occasional support from the left or the centre-right, depending on the issue. Both parties on the left and right criticised Macron for being in denial and refusing to accept his party's defeat. As my colleague Alain de Lauzon writes in her commentary, and I quote, "In these conditions, we should not be surprised by the chaos that now reigns in France. No winners, no losers, no clear political direction. One man at the head of the country, Emmanuel Macron, a king without a kingdom, worn out by power and incapable of convincing anyone to breathe new life into the 3 long years that remain before the end of his term." In the United Kingdom, the Labour Party won the general elections with a landslide victory, and it now holds a 2/3 majority in Parliament, despite only receiving a third of the votes. The new Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, said he had earned the mandate because the electorate saw that we can serve their interest. However, writes my colleague Michael Curzon in his scathing assessment, Labour actually won because voters have come to loathe the Conservative Party so much that they decided either to stay at home or to vote Reform UK. Just 59.6% of the electorate voted, the second lowest level since 1885, and Labour only improved its result by 1.7% compared to the last election. Meanwhile, Reform UK, led by Nigel Farage, came third in the total vote count with 14.3%, but got only 5 seats. The millions of votes for reform across the country stopped the Conservatives from winning dozens of seats, handing them instead to Labour. The new-look European Parliament is gearing up for its opening plenary session next week in Strasbourg. Following a shift to the right in June's European elections, the Parliament's third and fourth largest groups are now right-wing. The centre-right European People's Party remains the strongest group and hopes that European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen will get re-elected by the Parliament next week. However, instead of reaching out to the right-wing groups, von der Leyen is looking for the support of the left and the Greens to get a majority, meaning the EU could continue implementing left-wing policies, disregarding the will of the European voters. My colleague Thomas O'Reilly is here to explain. Thomas, first of all, let's talk about the composition of the European Parliament. How does the setup look like? Who are the new groups?
Yes, well, it's a slightly larger parliament than the last legislative term. There's 15 additional MEPs, bringing the total number to 720. But for those not familiar with the layout of the the European Parliament, there is the left, the explicitly communist and post-communist faction, consisting of the likes of Der Linke, Sinn Féin from Ireland, They're on the extreme left of the parliament. They have 40 seats in total. Moving towards the center left, you have the SND group, the likes of Pedro Sanchez, Social Democrats, the likes of kind of social democratic parties around Europe. They're a pillar of the kind of the EU establishment. They, broadly speaking, maintained their vote share. They lost 12 out of 148 MEPs, but they returned a relatively strong showing. In the centre of the European Parliament, regarded as kind of this pragmatic, centrist working group, is the EPP of Ursula von der Leyen. They have famously or infamously swung heavily to the left in terms of policy in 2019. Further to the right, you have now three right-wing formations. You have the recently formed Patriots for Europe, brokered by the likes of Hungary's Fidesz, Rassemblement National. They are the third largest parliamentary faction with 84 MEPs at present. You then have the conservative ECR group, the likes of Maloney's Fratelli Party, the Polish BIS. They're the fourth largest group. The big question is, will they be enabled to make a coalition with the centrist EPP for the next legislative term? I kind of take the kind of edge out of the EU's kind of hard left policy packages, especially when it comes to green policy. You then have the rather beleaguered Macronist Renew faction. They took a heavy beating. They lost approximately about a third of their MEPs. They're down at 77. And then you have the Greens, who are around 50 MEPs, but still quite powerful. In addition to that, you have a new kind of further nationalist right group, the ESN, formed by the AfD following their expulsion from the French-led ID group. They formed earlier this week through an aggregate of nationalist parties throughout Europe. And then you have a botched group of what is being referred to as anti-woke or even NATO-critical leftists led by Sascha Wegenacht that failed to get off the line this week but still maintains around 20 to 25 MEPs. But yeah, that's the basic layout of the European Parliament for the next 5 years. We have seen gains for the populist right. You see the likes of the ECR and even the Patriots for Europe becoming the third and fourth largest groups cumulatively. But this kind of cordon sanitaire of the last 5 years is trying to be resurrected as we enter the horse trading for the next European Parliament.
We have the opening plenary session of this new European Parliament next week in Strasbourg. And this is when the European Parliament will vote on whether Ursula von der Leyen is re-elected as the president of the European Commission. She needs a majority of 361 seats. Who is she currently negotiating with to secure that majority?
Yes, well, it's been often referred that the European Parliament is a chamber without power. But one of the few instances where the Parliament actually has power is the appointment, or in this case, the reappointment of the European Commission President, the chief executive of the entire bloc. Von der Leyen in 2019, she belongs to the Christian Democratic / centrist bloc DPP. She relied on a coalition of the left, federalist and pro-green parties. Broadly speaking, she's trying to cobble that same coalition together while extending something of an olive branch to the more moderate elements of the right, the likes of famously Fratelli's, the Italian Fratelli Party of Giorgia Meloni. Now, broadly speaking, it's a two-stage process for von der Leyen to get re-elected. She cleared the first stage at the European Council last week, where she required a qualified majority of 15 out of the 27 EU member states to be approved. She did this courtesy of Italy in particular abstaining. But yeah, this final hurdle is very much up for grabs. We hear reports and we hear rumours of constant calls going out to the offices of newly elected MEPs. Von der Leyen has addressed all major factions of the left and the centre the past week. The Greens, for example, they have demanded that the Green deal that von der Leyen famously premiered in 2019-2020, they demand that green legislation of the last 5 years remains intact. The left and federalist groups like Renew are demanding that a zero tolerance policy towards any sort of deal with right-wing parties. But it's up for grabs whether von der Leyen makes the 361 MEPs to return to the top job come next week. It's a secret ballot, which adds an extra element of mystery. Von der Leyen is getting heavy criticism from the left and the right. The right famously criticizing the technocratic nature of the office, her mismanagement of the COVID crisis, the Ukraine crisis. Their populist parties in total make up 25 to 30% of the entire chamber. It's unlikely she will get that. So von der Leyen is in a race to secure votes on the moderate right and the sort of hard left and eco left. She's endured a lot of criticism for her stance, her perceived pro-Israel stance, which is sure to cost her many votes in the S&D group. But as you said, the vote will be held next Thursday in Strasbourg as the Parliament sits for the first time. And we'll see if this horse trading gets von der Leyen another term.
Do we have any inkling whatsoever of whether she is able to gain this 361 vote majority? We know that 5 years ago when she was elected, it was only by 9 votes, so it was a very thin margin. Do we have any inkling of what could happen now?
Well, unsurprisingly, von der Leyen's office have expressed quite a confidence that they will make the mark. It would set a major precedent if von der Leyen is not re-elected and she doesn't meet the 360 MEPs required. Even within her sort of EPP party itself, the largest party within the parliament with 150 MEPs or so, there is something of a sort of power struggle with her number 2 fellow German Christian Democrat, Manfred Weber. There's a belief that the old coalition between the centre, the left, the hard left, and the Greens is simply unviable in the next 5 years, and it's time to kind of onboard the likes of the ECR and sort of other populists. But it's a vote. The European Parliament's very strange. It's not tied to a direct national constituency. There is a very strange whip system. The prediction is von der Leyen will make the mark on Thursday. I think the need for the EU political establishment to have a candidate is so great, but it could all fall through. It's, as I said, it's an entirely secret ballot. The last 5 years has seen von der Leyen burn up allies on the left and the right over issues like Israel and Palestine, the Green Deal. So it'll be interesting, but it waits to see, and we'll find out 1 o'clock Thursday in Strasbourg.
Thomas, thank you very much. One of the new groups in the European Parliament, Patriots for Europe, is now the 3rd largest group with 84 seats in the 720-seat parliament. The group consists of Marine Le Pen's National Rally, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán's Fidesz, the Italian Lega, the Dutch Party for Freedom, the Austrian Freedom Party, former Czech Prime Minister Andrej Babiš's ANO movement, and the Spanish Vox Party, which left the European Conservatives group to join the Patriots. In an interview with the European Conservative, Jorge Buxade, head of the Vox delegation in the European Parliament, said that the patriotic parties in Europe are united in their defense of national sovereignty, of traditions, of different cultures. They are fighting against illegal immigration and want to confront the European Green Deal. He said, and I quote, "It is another way of doing politics, a politics without thinking about the posts or thinking about the parties or the dinners you are invited to if you accept certain policies. To defend the interest of the people who voted for us and even those who did not vote for us. For example, Viktor Orbán, when he makes policies, thinks of all Hungarians and not only of those who voted for him. When we make policies here in Brussels, we think of the general interest of Spain and not only the voters of Vox." The European Parliament is reportedly discussing ways to boycott or end the rotating EU presidency of Hungary. The first informal European Council meeting organised by Hungary was held in Budapest on Monday and Tuesday, where the EU's economic ministers were supposed to discuss ways to improve European competitiveness. However, over 2/3 of EU countries sent lower-ranking officials instead, while the European Commission was missing entirely. Most member states are angry at Hungary because its leader, Conservative Prime Minister Viktor Orbán, recently visited Moscow and Beijing as part of his peace mission, whose aim is to open channels of dialogue with the participants of the war in Ukraine, as well as the most influential global powers. Orbán also visited Ukraine and held talks with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Turkey already proved during the war that it is an indispensable player in peacemaking, the Prime Minister said, referring to a Turkey-brokered grain deal between Russia and Ukraine 2 years ago. Orbán also met former US President Donald Trump in Florida after attending a NATO summit in Washington. The Prime Minister said Trump proved during his presidency that he is a man of peace. Despite making it clear that he was not engaging in negotiations on behalf of the EU, the ambassadors of almost all EU states condemned Orbán at a meeting in Brussels on Wednesday, saying he is using the Hungarian EU presidency as his extended platform during these talks, misrepresenting the EU as a whole. While most EU leaders prefer to send more weapons to Ukraine and are unwilling to negotiate a ceasefire with Russia, two separate opinion polls suggest that Europeans want Ukraine to be forced to the negotiating table instead of the EU pledging indefinite military and financial support to Ukraine. The leaders of NATO agreed to bolster Ukraine's defense at a summit in Washington this week. Members of the Transatlantic Military Alliance pledged air defense systems, F-16 fighter jets, and at least 40 billion euros worth of military aid within the next year to Ukraine, which has been fighting a war since the invasion of Russia almost 2.5 years ago. The alliance also decided to set up a new command center in Wiesbaden, Germany, which will coordinate and arrange delivery of security assistance to Ukraine, while overseeing the training of the Ukrainian armed forces. As NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said, "We are not doing this because we want to prolong a war, we are doing it because we want to end the war as soon as possible." However, NATO membership will not be handed to Ukraine for quite a while. The joint statement by NATO declares that Ukraine is on an irreversible path to membership, meaning accession could only happen once the war ended and all NATO members agreed to accept Ukraine. The alliance does not want to provoke Russian President Vladimir Putin, who recently announced that Ukraine would have to abandon its membership bid for Russian troops to leave its territory. However, in a clear sign of escalating tensions, the United States will start deploying longer-range missiles in Germany in 2026, and NATO also called out China for allegedly providing equipment, microelectronics and tools that are enabling Russia to build the weapons they use to attack Ukraine. US President Joe Biden was also a topic at the NATO summit as the president continues to show signs of a deteriorating mental health. NATO leaders are worried that Biden, who is running for re-election in November's presidential elections, is not fit enough to lead his country for another 4 years. The pressure on Biden to drop out of the race has been increasing since the 81-year-old performed terribly in an election debate with former President Donald Trump at the end of June. On the night, Biden spoke incoherently and displayed signs of frailness and mental decline. At a press conference on Thursday, which was supposed to prove that he is fit and able, Biden mistakenly referred to his deputy Kamala Harris as Vice President Trump. 2 hours earlier, at a NATO event, he introduced Ukraine's leader Volodymyr Zelensky as President Putin. An increasing number of US Democrats would like to see Joe Biden drop out of the presidential race and be replaced by someone else. According to media reports, former President Barack Obama and former Democratic House Speaker Nancy Pelosi have privately expressed concerns about how much harder they think it's become for the president to beat Donald Trump. Opinion polls suggest that Trump is on course to beat Biden at the November elections. And finally, a report released by the Austrian government on Monday has revealed how much mass migration is changing the face of the country. 27.2% of residents come from a foreign background, meaning they are first-generation immigrants or born in Austria to foreign parents. The ratio was 19.4% in 2013. The same report shows that 112,000 people applied for asylum in 2022, driven by a surge in Afghan and Syrian migrants. Austria's population is growing only due to immigration and is expected to reach 10 million by the middle of this century, despite a declining birth rate of 1.48 children per woman. While labour market needs are put forward as an argument for more immigration, the report shows that rates of employment among some migrant communities are significantly lower compared to the national average of 74.1%. Only 44% of Syrian and Afghan men are active in the labour market, a figure that drops to 26.3% for women from the same background. Separately, government statistics show that 45% of all crime suspects were foreign nationals. Austrian elections in September are expected to favour the Migration Critical Freedom Party of Austria, which was the largest party, receiving 25.3% of the vote in the European Parliament elections. And that concludes this episode of Brussels and Beyond. Don't forget to read our magazine, check out our website, subscribe to our Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube channels, and watch our monthly TV show, Inside Brussels. Hope you tune in again next week. Have a very good week. Bye-bye.